Hey, friends, we have a new edition of My First Job, hosted by me, your host, Mike Wood, on the Purple Acorn Network. And I'm very excited today to talk to Sean Luitjens. I probably butchered your last name. I'm not very good with names, but thank you for being on the show.
Yeah, Mike, you are not the first person to hurt my last name, so no worries. So, Sean Luitjens, live in Western Massachusetts and work for Vizier currently.
Oh, great! So I didn't even realize you're out in Massachusetts. I'm in central Massachusetts, out by Mount Wachusett. If you know where that. So whereabouts
I
in West?
do, yeah. So when early in my career in Massachusetts, I guess what I would call my second career, my professional career, we lived in Townsend and worked at
Okay.
Monster and Fidelity in that side. And I know you're just for the point where Massachusetts people think it's Boston, Worcester, then California. So you're just
Yeah,
near that line. Yeah, but
it
we're
gets
about 2 hours
a
from
little
you.
weird out here. Once you start venturing into Gardner, it gets even weirder. But great to meet another Bay Stater that's out in the affordability zone where I am, which is away from the city. But welcome to the show, and I'm very excited to learn about what your first job was. So lay it on me. What was your first job?
So I started in the restaurant business. So I was a dishwasher, and I worked for the Elks Club. The BPOE is, are they the Benevolent and Protective Order of the Elks, which internally they always told me was the best people on earth. But yeah, I worked in the kitchen, and paid half paycheck, half cash, which I don't think you can do that stuff anymore, right? And then stayed in the restaurant business through school. Like it became kind of how I paid for things, how I went through, and interesting. One of the things that drew me to this was I think a lot of the skills you learn in the hospitality industry become very translatable to your professional career.
Yeah, so expand on that a little bit, if you could. Like, so what do you remember? Like the first things you kind of had to deal with, and how you were probably like 15 or 16 at the time.
Yeah, this is when we sound like we also walked to school uphill both ways,
Yeah.
whatever. So I was 14 when I started. Yeah, and and worked through. I think a couple of things. I think you work with people from different walks of life. Um, the customer service skills you learn in the hospitality industry, they're very translatable. And to be honest, the people you deal with that are angry at a bar or a restaurant, a bar, particularly at closing time, makes anyone you deal with in a professional world like not a huge deal to tackle, right? It's all just relative. And then one of the things I learned, I still remember her name, the first time I learned to be a server, wait tables, I learned from a lady who was 60 some years old. She ran the restaurant by herself for a couple hours a day. And I'm like, how does she do it? And her time management skills were some of the best I've ever seen. No seconds went unwasted waiting for anything. While something was cooking, she was doing this. While something was going on, and she just always had a lot of balls in the air to make sure that that project, if you translate it to professional world, got done on time. And so a lot of things going in parallel instead of serial, and just trying to keep your brain fresh on all that stuff to make it all happen at the right time and come together. And that's just a super translatable skill with obviously a true deadline. There's customers waiting on the end, and who will be unhappy, and you get paid by that happiness when you're serving. So those are really translatable things that I think of still today.
I encourage anybody out there listening to go to an old diner that has an old lady that's running it, and everything's done pen and pen or paper, and just to see how they keep things organized, because I can't imagine having 7 or 8 orders up, especially something like breakfast where it's a quick turnaround, and trying to keep track of everything. So I can imagine this. You're making me. Did she have an apron on? That's what I'm
Well, she
visualizing.
didn't. We had the small ones that went around your waist, right? Like servers do. But like the example of making coffee, like I'd always tell my kids, like you go make coffee for the, you're out of coffee, someone wants coffee, but you don't wait for that to brew. You go do every other thing and you get the timing in your head. And it's a lot easier now that you're going to be back in 90 seconds. But in that 90 seconds, you're going to do 4 other things. No trip is wasted. So every time you go out to the dining room, and every time you come back, you're bringing something out, you're bringing something back, you're cleaning on the way, you're cleaning on the way out. Like everything has a purpose in your time and day, and everything's time boxed, just in micro level compared to today. And it's just really cool to watch that in flow. And it's a great skill for everyone to have. And I think also just it's a good skill for any human, to your point of just going and working in the service industry or retail and being on the other end of that. I think it just makes people better humans, as they go through life.
Yeah, so I've been like, so after the holiday season, I'm looking for some extra cash. So I actually started door dashing maybe like 2 weeks ago or something like that. And it's a little terrifying because you're at the whim of these people that you're bringing their food to. And it's just like, I'm like, okay, I live in an area that has like, well, around Leominster, that has like a ton of these different chain restaurants. People will, order things. Like if I'm already like in the area, it's a quick little trip. But I got one bad rating that was not my fault. And it's stuck with me for
Yep.
like 2 days now that I'm just like, this lady just killed me. And I'm like, it wasn't my fault. There's nothing I could do.
Well,
But
I
yeah,
think stereotyping, stereotyping is the other thing you learn, like people who are good tippers, bad tippers. And as someone who, if we talk about professional careers, I don't know what term you want to use, a little bit country, a little bit hippie, whatever you want to call it. And those people will stereotype you based on that first look. And tipping is a lot that way too. People who you provide the best possible service to every person, and you watch how the outcomes are different between human beings. And it's a good guide for like, you can't control everything. You can control your output, but what you get back is just super people dependent, and you don't know what's going on in their lives either at that moment. But you just, you treat everyone the same, and you never know.
yes, everybody should be forced to do some time in the service industry, just like they're forced to do some time in the army in some
Yeah.
countries. Now moving on, into school or whatever. Were you always interested in HR, or
No, so yeah, I'm a little bit uneducated, but I actually like many people, HR found me. I didn't find HR. I was actually I moved to Massachusetts from the South to my wife and I decided to get married, and then we had what I'll give myself credit, a discussion on who was moving. So I moved to Massachusetts, and I took a job with Fidelity Capital. Kind of actually cool at HR Tech this last year. I met the lady after been a long time since I talked to her, who hired me. No idea why she hired me. She basically, I'll show my age here. They were putting the community newspapers online, like the Framingham Tab and all those things online. And they wanted someone to help do that. She let me look at some technical books and basically said, do you think you can do this and work with some other stuff? And I said, yes. So it was like my first real job. And I still to this day have no idea why she gave me that job. Kind of an uneducated, bumpkin who moved up, and I don't know what she saw, but that was my first gig. We put a lot of that stuff online, including the online classifieds.
mm-hmm.
And while I was presenting about online classifieds and online in general back in the day, one of my co-panelists, I guess at the time, was Jeff Taylor, who was one of the founders of Monster, or the founder of Monster. And he asked if we met for lunch, and he asked if I wanted to come work there. And so I just went out there kind of in the early days of Monster, before the Super Bowl ad, et cetera, and kind of moved in. And that's how I ended up in HR, in the TA. Like truly just became a tech nerd off by reading books, and then happened to wander slowly in. And then literally that was like 1995, 4, whatever it was. And so, oh my God. So like 30 years ago. And I haven't got out of HR since.
It's funny. So like we've had Jeff on the show, and he's a wonderful person. And I grew up in the town that was next to Maynard, where they were headquartered. I've heard about Monster many times in my life. I haven't met him, but there's a ton of people that are still in the HR tech industry that have touched Monster at some point. And it's just crazy that it all stems from this one company that everybody's kind of branched off.
His ability to find talent, and I'm a good example. Like I wasn't in HR. I didn't come from a dev education. I didn't do whatever. But his ability to find people that would work in that culture, that are willing to fail fast, make mistakes, collaborate, be part of a team was pretty uncanny. And, that group of humans that we had around 2000 when we were really escalating was, I've joked over the years, you could take that same group of people and say, hey, go build a, software for the automobile industry, and it would get done. Just a super creative, amazing group of people. And I think like a lot of people, you get into HR and you have your expertise with your career. And at some point it becomes hard to kind of matriculate out. You have so much domain knowledge, and for some reason you stayed because you liked it. And so you just stay in there.
So you went to Monster, and then where'd you kind of go after that?
Went to Mercer. So basically it's a series of, if people go on LinkedIn, it's a series of either startups or what I would call old school startups, restarts. So at Mercer, it was a data division that had been there that needed a restart. Mercer is obviously a very old HR consultancy, but there was a guy that wanted to rebuild that division. And so specifically I ended up working in the benefits arena, helping on the tech front with there. And then, places like salary.com, Air Inc., which is a Massachusetts company, which is like a 60-year-old startup. And they were redoing a lot of the tech and the company and getting it back out and rebranding. And they're like jamming away now. So, that's kind of been the thing. And at some level, I know, when we email back and forth, it's like, what do you like in a job? I'm traditionally a fixer. Like I like to do something cool and build something new and then work on the next thing, and kind of understand yourself. I like to have my fingers in a bunch of different stuff.
So I've heard through a lot of different interviews with people for this podcast that, they didn't really know exactly what they wanted to do when they first started off, but everybody takes a piece of that first job or a piece of, something along the way. And it really takes until you get into your, late 30s, maybe early 40s, where you're just like, okay, this is what I want to do. This is what I know that I'm good at. Do you have any advice out there for people that are, looking to get into the workforce or confused with the career path?
So I guess my advice is kind of the best advice I got from somebody was, when I was at Monster, we were presenting to some very high tech. And at the time, high tech, you think about IBM, HP, like very formal people. And as you can tell, I dressed up for you today, and, some of my better attire in a Carhartt shirt, was to be myself. And I think, and kind of lean into that. And so people kind of know who I am and what you are, and don't worry about the stereotypes. I also think you just really need to figure out how you work best. So everywhere I've worked and been successful, management, I've worked for one guy 3 times, just kind of followed him, because the ability to succeed and have him be more public facing, and I could do the things I do and work well together. So you know what you do well and what you don't like to do and what you do poorly, and find somebody who understands that. And then the areas that you do poorly that you want to do well at, that they'll help you, they'll kind of accept you for who you are and be like, and give you really good feedback on like, hey, this is what, you want to do better at this. You kind of sucked last 3 or 5 months, doing this. We need to keep working at it this way and really help you grow.
So I've I don't know how much it comes across on, this podcast and stuff, but I try to be a funny guy. That's just my personality. I'll make jokes and keep things light. And that always, it hasn't necessarily helped me in my career. It's sometimes it's been a career limited move because people think I'm not serious sometimes. But I've realized through the years, and I'm 42 now, that you can't change who you are. That is just kind of how you are, and you just got to learn to, know the things that are part of your personality that you might have to turn off a little bit based on situations. But yeah, that really kind of hits home for me.
Well, I think getting that filter on, and when to be, for me, when to be country, when to dress, and I do, jokingly, I'm the guy, at most conferences, if I'm presenting, I'm in jeans and a t-shirt, but there are places around the world where I will put, a collared shirt. Like you just have to kind of like, okay, I'm going to go in the gray of my comfort zone because it's just not acceptable in certain places, and you just learn, and most of that's the school of hard knocks, like I shouldn't have done that, and making mistakes happens. It's just like, don't make the same one over and over again is kind of the lesson as you go.
Exactly. So you've been in the space for a long time. What do you think about the current job market and tools that are out there? What's your thoughts on what's happening in HR tech today?
And there's a lot of HR tech. I think the words I've been using has been get greedy for people in HR. I think in the past, some of the policies, the way to analyze and look at your company and how to think, about what you're doing and aligning it to the business was too difficult to do, because to pull in data from multiple sources and multiple places that are called multiple different things and then try to aggregate it and analyze that data in Excel, you couldn't do it. And so now you can come up with some really cool creative concepts and actually make that happen. And then the cool thing is you can be like, hey, did that work? Because the analytics that are out there now and the ability to process all that information is all out there now. And what I think is the really cool part, Mike, is if you can think it, you can ask it now. Because in the old days, like what I would consider one of my superpowers years ago was I was ability to translate development nerd to human. And AI does that for you now. And the agentic technology that sits in a lot of HR tech now to be able to say, hey, can you tell me this? And it'll give you the answer, because it does all the translation in the back and gives you the answer, is all really cool. And so I think, the thing now is like keeping up. Like, are you carving out and time boxing enough of your day to go out and be like, am I learning about AI every day? Am I a prompt engineer? Am I a whatever? And you might have to have kind of a moment of silence, as I've called it, of like, everything I learned 15 or 20 years ago, nobody cares now. Like my SQL coding skills, whatever, dude. Like I don't need to write SQL queries anymore. The agentic technology does that. So I think just keeping fresh on all that stuff, is really critical.
Yeah, finding out. I mean, if you're in HR, you got to know which kind of the key metrics you need to be looking at, and which are just going to bog you down.
Well, and don't get boxed in by what used to be. And by that I mean, like in TA, right? If you think about talent acquisition in the past, it was always time to fill and number of recs. Right? That was how you got measured, right? You're a recruiter. And, if I don't have recs, I'm not a recruiter. Now you have the ability to think bigger and say, actually, Mike's filling, 20 recs, Sean's filling 40 recs a year. Great. So Sean must be a better recruiter, right? Now you can go and say, actually, Mike's people stay longer. They're more productive. They're staying. They've increased and moved up in the company. They're leaders. Sean's people all take off after 6 to 13 months. Because he's not really a good recruiter. He's good at getting butts in the chairs, but he doesn't understand our company fit, etc. And so you can really think about really the right way to align the business and what's driving the business to the analytics, no matter how complex they are.
Well, I love you thinking about the Mikes of the world who may be overlooked with their output. If there are any listeners out there that want to find you online, where can they look? Where are you going to be? Any events coming up that you're going to be at?
I'm usually around the HR tech stuff. I know World at Work is a big one this spring. If you're in the comp tech space, a bunch of different World at Work affiliates, SHRM affiliates I usually present at. And then LinkedIn's easy, Sean Luitjens. It's kind of natural selection. If you can't find me on LinkedIn, things have gone awry. There's not many Sean Luitjens out there.
Well, thanks for coming on the show. I'll have to make my way out to Western Massachusetts at some point, grab a cup of coffee with you or a beer.
Yeah, whatever. Man, the inn's always open out here in the middle of nowhere.
All right. Well, thanks again for the episode, and I look forward to seeing you again in person.